Welcome back, everyone, to another explainer. I am so incredibly excited about what we are getting into today. Our mission is to decode a fascinating 10th century philosophical blueprint and completely transform it into a modern leadership and organizational masterclass. We're going to take some ancient wisdom and look at it through a highly practical lens, breaking down ideas that are complex but honestly just absolutely brilliant. If you've ever struggled with getting a team on the same page, building a strong culture, or really just understanding how large groups of people operate, you are definitely going to want to pay close attention to this.
So I want you to picture something for a second. How do you design a perfect city? Or to frame it more for our everyday modern lives, how do you build a perfectly harmonized organization totally from the ground up? Think about what it would actually take to create an environment where every single person is completely aligned, where friction is just minimized, and where the collective output is way greater than the sum of its parts. It sounds kind of like an impossible dream, doesn't it? Well, it turns out a philosopher from the 10th century might actually hold the ultimate blueprint for us. We're talking about Al-Farabi. But listen, today we are not just going to treat him like some distant historical figure or a purely abstract thinker. Instead, I want us to look at Al-Farabi as essentially an ancient management consultant. The frameworks he developed for social harmony and city management, they aren't just dry historical footnotes, they are incredibly actionable, structural guides for leaders today. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our agenda for today. 1. Designing the virtuous city. 2. Elite logic versus public rhetoric. 3. Building habits through discipline. And 4. Managing organizational weeds.
So, kicking things off with Part 1, Designing the Virtuous City, Establishing the Ultimate Goal.
As any good leader will tell you, every successful organization absolutely needs a clearly defined baseline target before you can start building any kind of infrastructure. Al-Farabi called this ideal state al-Madina al-Fadila, or the virtuous city, and it's defined as the ideal political community where all citizens cooperate to achieve true happiness and moral perfection. Now, the absolute crucial word here is cooperation. The foundation of any great city, or honestly any great company, relies on total cooperation toward a single, unified vision. Because without a shared target, you don't really have a city, right? You just have a crowd of people standing around in the same place.
So what exactly is that shared target? Al-Farabi identifies this ultimate goal as saadet, which translates to true happiness. But take a close look at what it is not. This isn't about chasing temporary physical pleasure or throwing some superficial perks at your team. It requires the total perfection of the soul, reaching true intellectual excellence, and achieving complete independence from material needs. When you apply this concept to leadership, it means your ultimate goal is unlocking the absolute highest intellectual and moral potential of your citizens, or, your employees. It's all about building a genuinely purpose-driven culture, not just a profit-driven one.
Moving right along to Part 2, Elite Logic versus Public Rhetoric, the Communication Divide.
Because let's be real, having a goal is only half the battle. How do you actually get people to understand and buy into it? This distinction between elite instruction and public rhetoric brilliantly illustrates one of the most critical leadership challenges you'll ever face, which is communicating complex truths across completely different tiers of a society. Al-Farabi recognized that people just process information differently. On one side, you have the Sechkindler, the elites. They rely on Burhan, which is strict logical demonstration, to reach absolute certainty. You give them the data, the raw logic, the spreadsheets, and they are good to go. But on the flip side, you have the avam, the general public. They don't really respond to abstract logic. They rely on hitavet, imagination, symbols, and emotional persuasion. As a leader, you literally cannot force elite logic onto a public that needs emotional persuasion and compelling narratives. It just won't translate.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how Al-Farabi turns a philosophical observation into a highly actionable communication strategy. He perfectly aligns the audience with the exact right method and tool. For the elite, the method is talim, acquiring theoretical knowledge, and they use the tool of Burhan, or logical demonstration. But for the general public, the method fundamentally shifts to tadib, which is all about shaping character, using hitabat, or persuasive rhetoric. Guys, this is a masterclass in organizational alignment. You absolutely must translate your high-level vision into symbols and stories that resonate emotionally with the broader team if you actually want them to follow you.
Which brings us to Part 3, Building Habits Through Discipline, the Tactics of Execution.
Okay, so we know how to communicate the vision, but how do we make it stick in the real world? We have to shift from theory to the actual on-the-ground tactics of execution. You see, you can't just talk at people. You have to actively condition behavior. So here is Al-Farabi's step-by-step pipeline for building a solid civic culture. Step 1 is kuve.
This is basically the starting point, the idea that the human mind is a blank slate, just pure potentiality. Step 2 is tadib. Now, this is the heavy lifting of leadership. It involves the disciplined, frequent repetition of virtuous actions. You don't just tell someone to be good, you make them practice it. Think of a modern organization rolling out a daily morning stand-up where team members have to publicly praise a colleague's work. At first, yeah, it's a forced discipline repetition, but eventually you reach step 3, malaika. Through all that constant repetition, the action literally transforms into a stable, natural habit of the soul. The behavior just becomes automatic. And that is exactly how you build an organizational culture that actually sustains itself.
But what exactly are we repeatedly practicing here? These habits have to target erdim, or virtue. And I absolutely love this definition. Al-Farabi describes virtue as the middle way between two harmful extremes of excess and deficiency. Think about this in terms of your own team's workload, right? You want a culture that completely avoids the total burnout of extreme excess, but you also have to fiercely protect against the laziness and stagnation of deficiency. True organizational harmony lives right there, tucked into that disciplined middle way.
Actually, I want to pause here for a second because this next concept is absolutely vital. Ikhtiyar. This translates to human choice guided by reason, not animal instinct. You might be looking at that habit-building pipeline we just talked about and thinking, wait, are we just programming robots here? Absolutely not. Al-Farabi reminds us that true virtue relies entirely on deliberate human choice and reason. You want your citizens, your team, to consciously choose that middle way because they deeply understand the why behind it, not just because they are blindly following an instinct or some rigid corporate rulebook.
And that leads us to our final section, Part 4, Managing Organizational Weeds, Risk Management. Because let's face it, anytime you get a large group of humans together, things are going to go a little sideways. We all know what happens when individuals reject organizational harmony. Let's be honest, every organization, no matter how beautifully designed, has its weeds. Al-Farabi literally called them nevabat, or weeds, and they are defined as individuals within the virtuous city who do not follow its moral values and instead act in ways that totally disrupt social harmony. These are your cynics, your active detractors, the people who flat out refuse to cooperate toward that shared goal of true happiness that we talked about at the very beginning.
And there is this brilliant, albeit tough, reality to this situation. Weeds are in the city, but they are not of the city. Sure, they occupy physical space. They sit at a desk. They log into the same Slack channels and servers. But emotionally and philosophically, they do not belong to the culture. Let me be extremely clear about this. These individuals pose a severe existential threat to the saadet, the cooperative survival of your entire system. As a leader, identifying and managing these weeds is not an optional task, it is a critical duty to protect the rest of your citizens.
Well, we have covered a massive amount of ground today, from defining our ultimate goals to tailoring our communication, building disciplined habits, and fiercely protecting our culture from disruptors. Al-Farabi might have written this way back in the 10th century, but I think we can all agree his blueprint is just as urgent today as it was then. So I want to conclude this explainer by leaving you with this somewhat provocative thought. As you look at your own organization, your own city, your own team, are you spending your time actively planting seeds of virtue, or are you just running around constantly pulling weeds? Think deeply about where your energy is actually going. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.